these types of events, these types of opportunities is not about you. It's about the guy or gal that's coming up behind you or is lateral to you that is struggling to overcome some type of adversity. You owe it to them to be open with not only what you did, but how you did it. In the wise words of my father, it's noon somewhere. Welcome to Objective Secure. With this being our maiden voyage with this series, we felt it was prudent for us to answer the how and the why behind this project. Really get into the genesis of Objective Secure. And the story really begins on the backside of my 2015 deployment to Afghanistan, which was my first rotation as an amputee. And coming back off of that deployment, I was forced into the limelight. Our leaders wanted to exemplify what was possible. They wanted to showcase what we were able to do collectively in terms of my rehabilitation, my abilities to get back into the fight, and then to be employed into that type of operational environment successfully. And I fought that tooth and nail, which was a fight that I lost, because when a general asks you for your participation in something, it's really not a request. That comes in the form of an order. So I begrudgingly began opening myself up to talk about what I'd been through just over the last 2 years leading up to that moment. And fortunately, one of our senior leaders was able to frame it in a way that resonated with me. And that was, hey man, I know your intentions and your level of professionalism, but these types of events, these types of opportunities is not about you. It's about the guy or gal that's coming up behind you or is lateral to you that is struggling to overcome some type of adversity. You owe it to them to be open with not only what you did, but how you did it. And that really was the catalyst for me. That was the spark that kind of began my gradual transition and level of comfort with exposing myself into the public space. It was a slow process, but eventually I started putting myself out there more and more into social media, and the influx of messages and traffic and questions began coming in. And that was a snowball, and it began to grow larger and faster. And the questions coming in really revolved mostly around the same two. It was, why did you do what you did? Why do you continue to do what you do? But more so, how did you do it? Which is fair. It was an unprecedented scenario. So I began answering these questions individually, one at a time, one message at a time, one email at a time. And as they're coming in volume, hundreds, eventually into the thousands, I decided to answer the question as to how in a simple, clean Microsoft Word document. Nothing fancy, extraordinarily simple. It ended up being about a 9 or 10 page document. And while writing that, the intent was efficiency. That's what it was. That was the initial intent, was just efficiency. It was just a faster way for me to answer the question as to how did you do what you did? How do you do what you do? Well, during the process of writing that, I reflected quite a bit, and I referenced my training log. I referenced my journals, dedicated quite a bit of bandwidth into just sitting there and analyzing that same question. How did I do what I did? Because up until that point, I really hadn't given it a whole lot of in-depth critical thinking. So for me, selfishly, that proved to be a lot of value because I learned a lot about myself during that process. Created, again, 9-10 page Word document, and then I used it as that tool for a couple years. So that way when people would ask the question, how'd you do what you did? Copy, paste, send, boom. Not only am I able to answer these questions a lot faster and more efficiently, but I'm giving the end user a better product, one that is much more thorough than answering them just off the top of my head in real time. Fast forward a couple years from that point, and along comes my buddy Eric. It's now early 2020, all right? COVID is running rampant throughout the world. People are working from home. People are working limited hours in the office, and the military was not exempt from that. It was a really strange time for most of us, and where half of the team could be in the team room at a time, and then we were teleworking. We were trying to make the best of what we could do without being all in the same place at the same time. I was able to attend the Combat Diver Qualification course in May of 2020. And it was when I was in that course down at Key West, I think I had a couple weeks left. My boy Eric hit me up and said, hey man, I got something I need to talk to you about. I said, cool, what's up? And he said, I think you need to write a book. And I am, around 4 weeks into what is a 6-week course, which is widely considered the most physically and mentally challenging school within the military. And I am absolutely beat down. And I'm in no condition to entertain this conversation whatsoever. And I tell him that. I said, listen, man, I'm exhausted. I'm a train wreck. I'm hanging on by a thread down here. Let's talk when I get home. So I get home a couple weeks later, and sure enough, Eric hits me back up and says, hey man, let's have a conversation about this. And out of respect to him, he's been one of my best friends over 20 years. I said, okay, what are you thinking here, man? And he's like, I think you need to write a book. And I said, dude, I don't want to write a book. I have no interest in writing a book. I don't enjoy writing. And I don't even know what I would talk about. And he said, he didn't push me in any general direction. He just said, do me a favor, out of respect to me, and just think about it a little bit. And I said, okay. And I did. And I actually did. And maybe a couple weeks after that, we circled back. And in the meantime, I had thought about this Microsoft Word doc product that I had been using. And the feedback that I've been getting from that now, at this point over the course of a few years, was tremendous. It was helping people. It was providing real, tangible value. So when Eric and I get back on the call, I said to him, you know what, man, I actually have this piece of literature that I wrote that I've been using, and I know there's something there. And he said, that's great, man. I think we have found the topic. Keep writing with it. Keep going with it. Keep adding to it. We're now in around July of 2020. And I still have a lot of extra time and energy on my hands because we're still dealing with this COVID thing. So the time and energy, the bandwidth that I would have normally been investing into my 9-to-5 work, I had to reinvest. So it opened up a window, it opened up a vacuum, it opened up an opportunity, which I filled with writing. And it started off real rugged, where I just began slapping words onto a page. And the process of that, going back into my training logs, going back into my journals, doing a lot of reflection, I really caught the bug for writing. I caught the bug for this project. I developed an obsession with it to the point where I was waking up at 3 o'clock in the morning and I just had to get up and write, which even in those moments was wild for me. to be like, am I seriously this interested in writing? But sure enough, I was, and I just began executing on that. Moving into the fall, August timeframe, work started opening back up, and I really struggled to maintain a level of bandwidth that I could commit to this project. Sundays became one of my key days, so really early mornings, but then I decided to forego football for the entire 2020 season. That became the window that I would give myself to write, where normally I would be, glued to the television for 6 hours a day, watching the Pats or whoever was playing. I was now in my office at home writing, and got to a point where I was doing sometimes 500-600 words a day, and I had a hard backstop. I gave myself a hard backstop of December because we were set to go into our next combat rotation. And I said, I'm gonna see what I can do between now and the time I deploy, and then reassess to see where things are at. Well, over the course of that, roughly 12 weeks, at the end of that, sometime around November, late November, I'm sitting on 270,000 words. And I have at least the contents of an actual book. The genesis of Objective Secure is important, and I think it's the most efficient way to explain what this project is about, because it still very much is exactly what it was intended to be back in 2016, 2017 timeframe when I wrote that 9-10 page Microsoft Word doc. It's the exact same intent. It is a tool for really anybody to leverage, focused on achieving goals while knowing that we will all have to overcome adversity along that route. Objective Secure is not an autobiography. It is not my memoirs. Yes, there are examples and stories that are filtered within the content, but just enough to give you, the reader, enough of an understanding as to what I was experiencing at the time that this particular principle became valuable to me, or the time that I realized how to leverage this particular principle or tenet or character trait. So if you're looking for the Nick Lavery story, Objective Secure is not where I would recommend looking. Objective Secure is a personal development piece. It casts a wide net. It's military language in general, but we worked really hard to ensure that that was able to be translated to every and anybody. That's the genesis of Objective Secure. That's the how, that's the why, and welcome to the Objective Secure series.